Welcome to episode 22 of the Sports Geek podcast. On today's episode, we'll chat with Jonathon Bernard from the Collingwood Football Club on the development of Collingwood TV to the club and the importance of storytelling. And what does the NBL need to do right now?
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, known for the Callanan Shimmy. Go on, YouTube it. Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. My name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek, and welcome to another episode of Sports Geek Podcast. On today's episode, I go into Collingwood this week at Westpac Centre and have a chat to Jonathon Bernard from the Collingwood Football Club and talk to him about the development of their video product. It was Collingwood TV, and now it's the club, a fully fledged half-hour episode on Fox Footy every week, and just some of the learnings they've had over the first two seasons of that. And we also discuss a project that they're looking to launch next year around the history of the Collingwood Football Club. And then later on, I talk a little bit about the NBL, the National Basketball League here in Australia, that has just started up its season, moving into summer, and some of the things that they can do to reconnect with what I would call a lost generation of fans. But that's later on. But first, here's my chat with Jonathon Bernard from the Collingwood Football Club. So I'm here at the Westpac Centre, home of Collingwood Football Club in the AFL, and I'm joined by Jonathon Bernard. Welcome, Jonathon.
Sean, thanks for having me here. I'm tipping you want me to maybe redo your American intro for the Sports Geek podcast. Is that why I'm here?
No. I get that from DJ Joel does the job there, and I get he does a fine job at that. So, first of all, tell us a little bit about, one, what your role is at Collingwood, and how long you've been at the Pies.
Sure. Well, I started at the club in 2008. It was actually it was 2 weeks before the Heath Shaw-Alan Didak incident involving their behaviour in the car and led to season-long suspension. So it was a pretty interesting moment to be at the club and kind of see, particularly from that media point of view, how the club reacts to something like that. And I started in what you would call a traditional media department, mainly focused on servicing media requests and, really being that go-to point from players to the general media. And then basically, I would say maybe 12 months later, the need and particularly the importance of more so social media at that time and then extending into, the website and different offerings was evident, and the CEO made a decision to create a digital media department, which I now manage. And at the present moment, we have myself and two full-timers here at the club, and then we have 6 part-timers, and we're just in the process of looking for a head of production for Collingwood TV next year. So yeah, I've been at the Pies for over 5 years now, and I guess growing up as a Collingwood supporter, it's not, you've got the passion there, so you tick that box, and then the interest in digital media exists now, so it's a really good combination.
So it's a pretty familiar path, and a lot of people who are listening to the Sports Geek podcasts, especially in sports, would have followed that same path of a small digital department, and then as you enter the content game, which you're very much part of now with producing content. You're competing against the AFL, you're competing against News Corp and Foxtel and ESPN and those kinds in producing your own content. You did touch on there Collingwood TV, and you're one of a few AFL clubs that have their own TV show. There's yourselves and Essendon have the club TV show on Foxtel, and West Coast Eagles have their Eagles Vision on Channel 7. What were some of the decisions around expanding your offerings to go outside digital and start the club, which is the TV show?
Well, Collingwood TV's not new. I guess the platform that we're now on is new. It's been around long before me. I think 2004, I was doing a historical video on CTV to see how far we've come. And in 2004, I think was the first footage and logo that I could find. And I guess since then, the quality of content and the style of content's changed with that online offering, and what used to be, I think, a couple of the first pieces was Neil Baum, talking about the latest loss, and it was a 45-minute, the most depressing show you'd ever seen on a Monday morning, and that's kind of where it started. And then obviously since then we've tailored it to where we know and how content works online. And then the decision was made in 2011 that we should look at potentially going on a television format. We had sort of interest from Channel 7, from Fox Footy, and there was, particularly with Fox Footy, there was they had just relaunched their channel and kind of were desperate for insider content. And I guess what we had been able to show in the lead up to that decision was that, well, we could create our own, I don't want to call it exclusive content, but sort of our own content that is Collingwood produced and probably has a little bit of a different flavor than what's covered out there in the general media. So again, the decision came from Gary Pert that he wanted the club to be in this space, and I think not only as an extra touch point for our members and supporters, but I think there's an element of credibility which existed with that decision and gave to Collingwood TV. So it was really the decision was made because we wanted to have the ability to tell probably longer stories and stories that were not as topical as your milestone moments or your injured players. Still tell those, but also have the ability to spend 10 minutes, talking about a key club stalwart who's been here for years and is as passionate as the president, and still have that compelling point of view as well. So we partnered with Fox Footy, and Essendon also had come on board, and in that first year, we certainly learned a lot, and so we've just wrapped up our second season, and I think now we've done about 55 episodes across 2 years.
I think a key point of that is, and I think a lot of sports understand it, but it's really around the resourcing, is the storytelling capacity that the teams have, and you do have that insider content, and that's what the fans crave, and to be able to tell that longer form. I think the case of Collingwood TV, migrating to the club was a case of, continually building that web content and doing those webisodes, whether it be black and white TV with the players interviewing each other and the smaller club spots. Pretty much proved the point to Gary Pert to say, well, the fans love it. We're producing it for the fans. We're providing that point of view and that editorial from inside the club that other outlets can't provide, and we know our fans love it. For those who don't know, Collingwood does sell a lot of newspapers in Melbourne, and it is a very cluttered market in Melbourne with so many football teams, and I like to call it the sporting capital of the world for the people listening in. So from the first season of Collingwood TV to the second season of Collingwood TV, what were some of the, like you said, there was a lot of learnings. Like the first season was very studio based. It was used a lot around breaking your own news. I do remember blogging about it. The Scott Pendlebury signing was deliberately held back, and you used that as a platform to say you've got to tune in. How did you go about? What did you learn from that? But how did you also go about coordinating those efforts for those big type events?
I think what we learned is that the studio component of the show was a great experience because, from a production point of view, it doesn't take a heck of a lot of effort to put together 7 to 10 minutes of studio production. What we found our main success was with the opening 10 minutes of the show, which we really tried to have that kind of reality fly on the wall feel. I don't want to compare it to the ESPN 30 for 30 style shows.
But the Hard Knocks kind of
But the Hard Knocks style, and I think that's kind of the real show that we were trying to create. And the other element about the show that's so interesting is it's probably one of the only shows that had not only in that format but is a weekly show, and the pressure to create weekly content, which is really determined about the last 7 days events, and turn it around for television, is really unique. I remember halfway through the first season I was just pounding my head against the wall saying I'd love to have 4 months of content and then be able to produce that into a couple of really tight shows. So there's a lot of pressure and demand to get over 7 days to get up a 22-minute show. So what we learned is that from our members and supporters and the feedback at the end of the year that we received is they loved that opening 10 minutes, which gave basically kind of the most live, updated account of what had just been going on at the club through the eyes of a player or a supporter or a staff member. And then the studio time, well, I loved that because it was an easy piece to produce. They sort of turned off, and I think they turned off because it really was a piece that you could be watching on the 360, which was just before the club show, and there was no point of difference. We'd have a player talking to a host, and in 6 minutes there's only so much you can talk about the upcoming game, and I think we quickly realized that we didn't want to be another footy show. We wanted to have that Collingwood unique storytelling angle to it. So one of the main decisions that we came to at the end of the first season was to drop that studio component and to try to continue that opening 10 minutes of that reality feel throughout the remainder of the show, which proved a struggle. But what we also were able to do was factor in our sponsors as well in a little bit of a less obvious manner in which we did the first season. So if you watch the second season of the show, you'd see a lot more, for example, Holden branding when we were on the road with players and the coach, and we can get away with maybe spending 10 seconds of that opening show with featuring the Holden logo and the Holden car, whereas previously we might have looked to knock up what I would call an ugly 30-second spot on Holden, which we still did to a degree in the second season, but not as much. So I guess we kind of learned more what the supporter wanted and also how to get a bit of return on this investment that we made for the show.
Yeah, I mean, I think the commercialisation aspect is vital. You can't go and do these things, because you've got to have that ROI. You've got to have how we're getting returns, and integrating your sponsors into those stories is far easier than saying, oh, we've got a 30-second spot here, you can buy that spot. I think sponsors are looking for that tighter association with the brand, and if you are filming a player driving the car and arriving the sponsor, but doing a clinic or showing that side of the community side of what Collingwood does, it's very important. So one of the things with Foxtel and Fox Footy, when you are a subscriber, it's great and you see it all, but only 25% of Australians have cable television and have access to Foxtel. So how did your department look to take, one of the big things about content marketing, and I do remember someone described it at Social Media Marketing World in San Diego earlier this year. Content marketing is a lot like Thanksgiving, where you produce a piece of content and that's a turkey, but there's always leftovers, and it's about how you slice and dice those leftovers to reuse on different platforms. So how did you take, you've got 22 minutes of premium content that, ran live on a Wednesday night, and, fans that could watch it loved it. But what did you do to make sure that the fans who couldn't get it got access to it and effectively, stretch that content out a little bit?
Well, initially we uploaded the episode in full, and that was basically a single, 22 minutes chunk of video in that first season. And we quickly saw particularly through the YouTube analytics, that the viewership dropped off dramatically as soon as that first story sort of finished. Supporters knocked off. So we made the decision to allocate a little bit of extra resource that night of the show premiering, so it was a Wednesday night at 8:30, to ensure that if the 22 minutes comprised of 6 separate segments, that those 6 separate segments would be uploaded independently, and then we had the ability to, I guess, market those to our supporters in a different manner. So on the website, you might have your channel, your episode landing page with the 6 segments, but then we might look to, if we had a really sort of sexy segment on a club event with we had girlfriends and partners, we might use that on Facebook, because we know that might attract the eye a little bit more, and then on Twitter we might look to just promote the key topical event from that show, whether it was a re-signing or whether it was an injury update. So we wanted to make sure that while Fox Footy was a great platform for those that had it, that we didn't neglect the rest of the army with the platform. So we just wanted it out there, I guess.
And was that bite-sized sort of content I guess, well received and something that, the fans can, whether they're on the train and they just want to catch up and it's a 2 or 3 minute piece, they can do that, or it's either through the app and those kind of things. Was it easier to consume?
I think so. I think we still found a bit of a struggle with supporters going through each segment. I think they in turn would only look for the 1 or 2 that would interest them and watch that, and the rest of the show they wouldn't watch. What we've also found, though, and probably this week's a perfect example, is we were then able to lean on these segments and use them later down the track. So, for example, we're currently in the midst of trade week, and Derek Hine, our national recruiting manager, is appearing to do a magnificent job on all fronts and is getting the accolades from the Army online. So what we're doing is we're rehashing the piece that we did on Derek Hine earlier in this year when he was talking about the recruits he was looking at and a bit of his life story, and we're rehashing that online this week because the supporters are interested in, well, Derek Hine, who is this mastermind, the architect? Well, we've actually got the episode titled The Architect, and there's 7 minutes of Derek Hine. So it's great to be able to lean on these segments that we've spent time and effort and resource in creating, and whether it's for repurposing of content online or strengthening our relationship with supporters and sponsors in particular, we found that to be almost as worthwhile. So really, this year we're in a position where if Collingwood had a sponsorship event on, or we wanted to get a little bit of media attention to, if for whatever reason we didn't think the media would show up or there wouldn't be much attention, we could rely on the club, the television show, to help use that as a bit of its own media platform to just guarantee that there would be some coverage.
And you do see in the last couple of years that traditional media are reporting on what is happening in the club. So it is effectively being quoted on the next day, or it is a trigger for a story. So you can use that as a piece to see the traditional media say, oh, here's a story we would like told, we're going to break it here, and then start that news cycle or start that debate. It sort of gives you that platform. It
does, and I think what we probably fell into the trap of that first year was, if we did have a player to re-sign, we really looked to hold it off, to answer your question earlier, to hold it off until we'd sort of, because the show's taped, we'd sneak the player in studio. There's 10 or 11 people that are working on the production from Fox Footy, so we have to trust them that they don't leak it out. And eventually it would get out, whether it's the player manager. To hold till 8:30 that night is largely impossible. So our mentality changed from not necessarily breaking the re-signing, but you will hear from the player here first, which took a lot of the pressure off and made a lot more sense.
I mean, I guess the model for the breaking news is one that from the president, Eddie Maguire, used to be host of the footy show, and news used to always only break at 9:30 on a Thursday because Ed did such a good job of holding it. So the model was there, but I think I remember the Pendlebury re-signing. It was the members are always first, so the members got an email that effectively said Scott Pendlebury re-signs, tune into the club. So automatically you're alerting all the fans. They are starting to push it out from a social point of view, and then the traditional news outlets are picking it up. But they know that the first point of contact, and if you want to hear him speak, is going to be on the show. So it sort of generates the traffic back to there, and then obviously to your site and that kind of traffic. So it is important to sort of keep your members in the loop, and how vital email still is to contact your fans. But it's sort of how you can manipulate the media in a certain way.
Well, I think another great example is this year we saw Dane Swan, was enlisted by the Footy Show to go on and kind of do this in-depth revealing interview. At the time, there were rumors swirling about him, and the Footy Show had this interview which they secured, and really, I think they did the interview on I can't recall, on the Tuesday, and they used small little grabs Tuesday, Wednesday into the Thursday night show. And I think the interview, I can't remember, went for 5 or 10 minutes with Damien Barrett. And sort of at the end of it, you watch this interview, and what do you really get from Dane Swan, who is having another breakout season and is a quality player, and you get I felt like the supporters didn't get a lot from that, and we actually received a fair bit of feedback the next day from members querying the fact, why was a Footy Show harping on this sensationalized interview when in actual fact there wasn't much to the interview itself and the content. So what we did was, a few weeks later, we dedicated 22 minutes to Dane Swan, and we had the Dane Swan episode. and we saw him, get a tattoo. We saw him redevelop his house. We drove with him to a game, and we spoke to his parents. And the insight that we were able to showcase in 22 minutes and really tell the Dane Swan story gave supporters a little bit more fulfillment, and felt like they had that stronger relationship with the player post that show. And it was something that we were able to not necessarily control, but provide and have that relationship with the player, that we were able to maximize the time we spent with him and the story we could tell.
I mean, I think the main thing from a club point of view is that you have a different motive for what the story is. So when Damien Barrett is interviewing Dane Swan on the Footy Show, he obviously wants to be sensationalist, and not that that's his main read, but he wants ratings and people outside Collingwood supporters to comment on Dane Swan and be talking about it and forcing them to tune in. Whereas your main purpose is to talk to the Collingwood fan, build that connection with the Collingwood fan, make the member feel like they're more a member. So when renewal process comes up, which is happening now, they just tick the box and say, yes, I'm in because I feel closer and a deeper connection to Collingwood. So from a sports team point of view, when you are framing that content, you have a certain audience in mind, and it's just your fans. You're not worried about what other fans are going to comment on. To a certain degree, you embrace, as Collingwood being a big club, you embrace other fans not liking what you're doing, because you're really trying to push your message of side by side and bringing the fans as close to the players as you can. So you're always going to have that ability to tell that story directly to the fans and what they want. And the fact that you've got channels from a social point of view, previously you wouldn't have got that feedback to say, oh, we didn't like that. Like the fact that they're complaining to you that another operator is doing something poorly, then you can take that and go, well, we better do a Dane Swan episode because that's what the fans want.
I also think too, the supporters are getting, I don't know if it's a little bit more savvy, but I think they're expecting more from content they're consuming now. I think with the relationship that they have with whether it's clubs or players or the sort of the host of that content, I think because they're getting such direct, immediate, raw access, that by the time it reaches that media outlet and by the time that media outlet adds its own spin to it, I don't think the supporters they're not certainly looking to access that first through that platform. They've probably already got the majority of that story somewhere else, and they're looking to gain insight. And I think where really the only insight they can gain at this point in this day and age is analysis. But stories and content, I think the expectation of a supporter has grown dramatically since the implementation of social.
And I think also that the clubs have moved away from, and you even said yourself in that first season of the club, it's moved away from, we must break it first. And social is about, very much promotes that, it's got to be first, we've got to be the first to do it, whether it be a news outlet or whether it be a club or even a fan. I've heard this I'm going to be the first to say it, because then I'll be trending and all that kind of stuff. And I think clubs are now mindful of, first get you something. It does get your, first early page views and things, but you're really looking at, better metrics are, how can I extend the time on site? How can I get our fans to read more content? So that's where it does become, insider analysis or talking to a Derek Hine about trade period, because he's not talking to the media, and that's what the fans want. They want more breadth of their content rather than just, we found out they signed. But that's been rumoured and been talked about. Trade period's a good example of how hamstrung clubs are, because you can't talk about something until it goes, becomes official, and by the time it does become official, it is old news. So you've got to provide a spin to it to say, well, we know, you know everything about this guy because we've been to something that it's been talked about forever, but we're going to provide you something different that all the other media outlets are doing, and not so much worry about the breaking, but here's his first words of joining the club, or here's a bit more insight into that story that you're not going to get anywhere else.
And I think on that trade front too, our strategy with covering the rumors and stories is we obviously want to be a key player in this period because it's so popular for us online. This is our most popular time outside of the draft. And the mentality and the strategy we took with that is we said, well, we can't obviously cover the rumors, but we can cover what the papers are saying about the rumors. So every morning we have on our website basically just a short, sharp breakdown of who's saying what about anything in relation to Collingwood. So while we're publishing that, we're sort of washing our hands of it as well, because we're attributing it to where it's come from. So we still can be a player in that. And then, as we see, we signed Jesse White yesterday, and we get Jesse White in, put him in the jumper, and he's speaking on Collingwood TV first yesterday. Then we get that great content. But at least in this strategy of covering what's being said about the club, we're not losing out on speculation and what we would love to do but we can't do.
Yeah, and that's where clubs can be in that curation mode to say, oh, here's all the things that you may have missed, and they still come to you as a source. Looking forward to next year. You flicked me an email yesterday around an initiative you're going to do for 2014 around the history of Collingwood. You want to give us a bit of an idea of what that's going to be?
Sure. It's probably one of the most exciting projects the club's looking at. In my time here, I think the club's got such a proud and strong history, and it's something that we've done really well to honor. And at those moments that require it, whether it's 20 years since the 1990 flag or whatever the case may be, a passing of a player, we do a great job of honoring that. But where we probably haven't spent a lot of time on is not necessarily honoring it, but just creating the content around it and then housing it somewhere that, not necessarily because it's 20 years since 1990, it's 21st year and some supporter wants to explore 1990, we have that, and we have that ability to do that. So what we are launching is, I guess it's under the banner of Forever Collingwood. And there's a couple of things that go into that. Namely, one is Jamie Cooper, who's a world-renowned artist and has painted the 1990 mural for us in the 2010 Grand Final replay painting. He's going to paint a mural which encapsulates the history of Collingwood, which comprises of moments, places, things that really scream Collingwood. So whether it's this simple art form of a magpie, or it's Mick McGuan's 7 bounces against Carlton. What we're doing is to get these moments, and there could be 50 moments on this painting, there could be 100, is we're going out to the Magpie Army and we're saying, well, what moments do you want? And we're just about to launch forever.collingwoodfc.com.au, and on that website it'll basically give you about 100 moments to select from, and you can either like those, and if you want them in, you can like them. If there isn't a moment that you see and you want a moment included or to be factored in, there's a submission form there. And what we will do towards the end of next year is, so Jamie's in the very, very early stages, he doesn't have these moments yet, we'll finalize these moments over the next 4 or 5 weeks once we get supporter feedback, and that's going to go straight to Eddie and Gary Pert. And once those moments are finalized, we'll give them to Jamie, and then Jamie will paint this great mural of the Collingwood moments, which will be launched towards the end of next year. And then in combination with that, every player who is put on the black and white stripes will have their name printed on a Guernsey. This has happened across a few clubs now, and this will be tying well with the launching of the mural to honor every player who's played for Collingwood, and the players will wear that out during the game, and those jumpers will be auctioned off with most of the proceeds heading towards the Collingwood Past Players Foundation. And then we'll look to develop forever.collingwoodfc.com.au further. We'll look to create a really strong historical website that this club needs and deserves. I've spent a heck of a lot of time looking at what exists out there at the moment across the sporting landscape around the world, and have still yet to be blown away by a website which really tells us the history of a sporting club, and that's the goal of this. We want to get to the micro level of, comparing how Peter Dacos went on Victoria Park to Alan Didak went on the MCG, and we really want that stats element there. We want that player profile element there, and we want the stories to be there as well. So it's kind of a project that so many different departments around the club are involved in, and while there's no significant 2014, there's no significant year, the significance is, the history of this club, and it's probably something that's been long overdue.
Oh, very good. I look forward to seeing David O'Donoghue, who played back in 1910. He's my great-grandfather. So he played for the Pies, I think 53 games out of the back pocket. So that's why I'm a Collingwood man. My great-grandfather played for Collingwood over 100 years ago. So and then from a content point of view, like that obviously is just going to give you so much content to integrate into things like the club and to again tell those stories. How are you going to try to balance the digitally savvy fans versus the history? Like, because a lot of people the digital natives will be voting for 1990 and 2010 and the Mick McGuan bounce and that kind of thing. Whereas, my dad, who's got great-grandpa's playing certificate in his shed when he's out there and spends a lot of time out there, he's not on Facebook and he's not tweeting, and he consumes some stuff, but he would have a stronger memories of the 50s and 60s and 70s. How are you going to try to get that balance of there's a lot of history pre-1970 in that kind of website?
Firstly, is it worth alerting the listeners to the fact that you are wearing a Collingwood jumper in the Collingwood boardroom?
It's the theatre of podcasts. Yes, of course I'm wearing a full Collingwood kit today.
No, it's a good point. I guess we don't want to miss the input of those supporters that aren't in the online space. But I guess what we're factoring in is how we will communicate this opportunity will be to largely the masses through, obviously we've got our EDM database, which ticks most of those boxes by now. And also the way in which our members are now signing up. Those members that are not signing up online, the numbers decreasing dramatically. And we now actually house a call service center here. And we've had that within the club for the last 12 months, and we've actually got 7 full-time people that are communicating to our members on the phones every day. And it's not just selling membership, but it's alerting them to opportunities currently as forever.collingwood FC. So that's, we'll take that into account, and also, between the Prez and the few historians at the club too, we've got a core group of historians that wouldn't know what Facebook does or how it exists, but they certainly can help pick up those moments as well. So we're pretty confident that we'll have a really great collection which comprises of those moments that people are looking for.
Terrific. So that pretty much, we've had a pretty good chat. I guess one last thing I wanted to just ask you from what's the key, I guess, metrics or the key drivers for you running the Collingwood media department, the digital side of things? What are the key things that you're looking to get and to build?
Well, first and foremost, the metrics are extremely important, and they're certainly attached to our performances, and it's something that if those above who I report to are keenly intent on. I guess I just want to say we pride ourselves now so much on the content and the relationship that we've created that's first and foremost. And I think probably when we first started out, we were so obsessed with the number, and even when you come into the Westpac Centre today, you see a dashboard out there that showcases how many Facebook fans we have and Twitter fans and how we rank. And we've always been at Collingwood so obsessed with ranking number one, and particularly in those early stages of digital media, that was a clear objective. Yeah. Since then, I think we've realized, yes, number one is sort of has to occur, but it has to occur in a way where we're not butchering it and we're not butchering the communication. So that's first and foremost. In terms of metrics and what we really look to achieve, I think with how the success that we've received from the mobile app over the last 12 months, and we've had 85,000 downloads of this mobile app, which Telstra provide us. And we've seen the views change towards mobile. What we're looking at doing is now, well, how does this content work on mobile? Is it optimized? It's almost we create everything for the handset, and then actually the website is now second. So that's probably the mentality, and those metrics surrounding video views through the mobile, page views, time on site, all those kinds of things that's our focus.
Yeah, it is, again, a maturity of the market itself and the sports market. Initially, everyone was looking at how many likes have we got, how many followers have we got, and it's an initial thing that you want to build. But then once you get past those numbers, and it is something that takes a while to explain to CEOs and that kind of thing, that again, not digital natives, to really realise that it's actually, how much traffic are we driving from Facebook, how much traffic are we driving from Twitter, how engaged are they with, not only with the content overall, but then these key pieces. So, if you're doing a key video piece on the Collingwood Forever stuff, how many people are viewing that and commenting on that, engaging with that, is getting to, that's what you want to track, the success of each particular piece, because not every particular piece of content is going to hit that broad market of everybody's going to love it. Like, you put out the highlights after a win, and yes, you're going to get a big spike, all the fans are going to love it, but then you're going to do a profile piece on a player doing something in the community. It's not going to get those same numbers, but you have to benchmark that piece of content against its own thing. So you're not just comparing everything against everything, because there's certain pieces of content they're going to go ballistic. Winning does help and all those kind of things, but then you've got to have the consistency of, when we put out this content, it's going to hit the mark, and you have those metrics of video views. Yeah, definitely mobile is getting greater and greater all the time. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I look forward to footy starting up again in 2014. Hopefully I'll catch more games next year without the moon boot on.
Sean, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, mate.
Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now.
Thanks to Jonathon Bernard there from the Collingwood Football Club. Hope you enjoyed. That was a little bit of a different style of interview. I was able to go there in person and also just have a little bit of a longer interview than the spots that I do on ABC Grandstand and Halftime. Please let me know if this is the kind of interview that you would like, something a little bit longer form, allows us to dive in a little bit deeper on some of the topics. Some of the key takeaways for me in that discussion with Jonathon was just the storytelling element that Collingwood are pretty much using their video strategy for, to tell those longer form stories that traditional media aren't telling, and also the feedback and the listening that they're doing with the fans, both what they're saying verbally on social media and things like that, but also looking at the stats, the fact that the fans were diving in and consuming the longer interest pieces, the stories telling the behind the scenes of the players, more so than the cliche grabs and press conferences. So a few takeaways there. I'll put some links in the show notes on some of the things that Jono touched on. And yeah, again, love your feedback. Hit me up with an email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. Next, here's my chat with Half on the NBL, and it's actually a couple of days after talking to Jono.
Sean Carolan, our sports digital media guru for sportsgeekhq.com.
10 to 3 on half time. Sean, g'day.
G'day, Half. How you doing?
Going very well, thank you. Now, I know you're going to save the NBL very shortly, but just going over the news again for footy fans that Heath Shaw, the deal's been done with GWS. We believe it's just a straight swap for Taylor Adams. So Shaw to the Giants, Adams to the Pies, and that's the way it is. Now, no official confirmation from the AFL yet, but that's what's being reported.
It's being reported as a win-win.
Everyone has a win-win here. There's no losers in any of these trades.
Exactly.
Everyone's winning, except for the NBL. Although, for the last 48 hours, I said this on Twitter today, I think KB should be put in the Basketball Hall of Fame for talking about, and Tommy Greer as well, by the way, for talking about the elephant in the Australian sport room that is the NBL. And all of a sudden, particularly from our angle here at SEN and the Melbourne sporting public, I would assume, it's getting some feeling involved in it. And emotions, everything in sport. There is a bit of talk
back and a bit of passion. That's good. And that's,
emotions, everything. What are you going to do to save it?
KB's done a good job of sort of stirring up a bit of passion and firing up the basketball community. I think KB made some valid points, and I think the main issue for the NBL is that they lost a generation of fans.
Yes,
they lost a generation of fans when they went to Foxtel, and effectively for 10 years. There was a large majority of the market didn't get to see them. And in that time, we did see franchises fall over, move to smaller venues and those kind of things. But there are success stories in the NBL. The Breakers are one in New Zealand, but that's a whole country supporting a team. But another one is the Perth Wildcats.
They're going gangbusters over there.
They are going gangbusters. But to give you a little bit of a history lesson, before they moved to Perth Arena, they were playing in a similar scenario as the Melbourne Tigers. They were playing in a small venue, out of town, doing well, filling it up. 2,000 or 3,000 people were attending the games and loving it. But they were out there for so long, and again, wasn't getting the reach from the TV that, again, they lost a generation. So they had fans who remembered the old days, and people
James Crawford and Tony Pinder and Vlahov.
Vlahov and Ricky Grace and all that kind of stuff. And in the same way that Melbourne fans can rattle off Gaze, Copeland, Ronaldson, D-Mac, or they can rattle off all those. Exactly. So they can rattle off all those names. And so what we did with the Wildcats, we had to re-engage that past fans.
Yep.
So all the time, when we're looking at it from a digital point of view, but it's not just digital, it's also free-to-air, and it's great now that the NBL is on free-to-air because, again, it opens it up. But when you're communicating, whatever channel, whether it's TV, radio, or digital media and social, you're looking at three kinds of fans. They're fans from the past.
Yep.
And so the NBL has a stack of those fans that have been there, and you need to identify which ones do we want back. Do we want the ones back that used to go paid? We don't want the ones that just turned up for a free ticket. You want the right ones.
Yep.
You've got your current fans. They're the ones that are filling up the SMS now and saying the NBL's a great product. They're your current fans. You want to always be continuing to talk to them. And then you want to target your future fans, the ones that are going to come ongoing. And at the moment, I think the NBL is talking a lot to their current fans. And their current fans is a small fan base. Like they're talking to the converted a little bit, and they have to, lower their eyes or widen their vision to a certain degree from a court vision point of view, and look at, well, how can we re-engage that audience that remembers the old NBL? But then they have to. The big thing is they have to get that lost generation. So that lost generation is between 15 and 25, 28, who haven't seen the NBL in 10 years. And so they don't know the players, they don't know the teams, they don't know where they're playing.
Yep.
But the advantage is they're digitally savvy, they're using mobile phones, they're all over Facebook and they're all over Twitter. So you've got to engage your current fan base. So if you've got 3,000 people at the cage, there's 3,000 people who can advertise to their friends about the awesome experience that it is. So I went to the cage on Sunday. It was a great game. The atmosphere was there. The quality of the guys on court, there's no question about that. Guys like James Ennis, Goulding, Mark Worthington and that. Those guys are there, but we need to get the 3,000 fans to tell the story, and we need to get the players to help tell that story. The social allows that, and that's what we did with the Wildcats. We started to re-engage with that past fan base that used to go into the city to the games.
Yep.
And grew their social numbers to prove that, hey, now we're back in a new venue. And that's sort of what the Tigers are going to do, and that's what the NBL needs to do. They need to make sure they're communicating with those other fans, and not just communicating with the basketball faithful.
With the converted. You've got to reach out, as Jack says off the SMS. Nice to hear someone who makes some logic and sense read the NBL issues. I'm going to get you in touch with the Melbourne Tigers because you've got a handle on what's going on here, and that would certainly help not only them but the game going forward, I reckon. Sean, great to see you, pal.
Cheers, Huff.
SportsGeekHQ.com for more details on all that sort of stuff.
Check out which teams work with SportsGeek at sportsgeekhq.com/clients.
Well, that was just my quick take on what the NBL can do. That's the National Basketball League here in Australia. I think the main takeaway is pretty much coming from my own Sports Geek strategy of past, current, and future. Anytime I'm doing any content, whether it be this podcast, a tweet, or going on radio and doing traditional media, I always view it as though I'm talking to my past, current, and future clients. And I think that's really what basketball needs to do. At the moment, they're really just talking to their current fans. So what you really need to do is anytime you're framing any piece of content, you need to think about who is this content for, who am I trying to target, and have a real purpose behind that. Because if you get stuck in just talking to your current fans, which is very easy to do, they're the ones that are most vocal, it can be a little bit difficult and you're not really widening, I guess, that vision of what you can do with your fans. So the sounds of the game this week, you can hear it underneath my voice, is actually from the Melbourne Tigers game on Sunday. I look forward to seeing how the NBL develops, especially with its access to free-to-air this year. That wraps up for another episode of Sports Geek Podcast. This is episode 22. As with all show notes, just whack the number at the end of sportsgeekhq.com/podcast. 22 to get the show notes and all the links from this episode. I'm also starting to put the podcast up on SoundCloud. Go to soundcloud.com/sportsgeek. Give us a follow. Please, let me know if you're using SoundCloud. It seems to be a growing platform for sports, with sports radio stations and some teams putting up clips and quotes from press conferences and the like. As well as a few major podcasters in the space using it as a platform as well. So I'm going to give it a go and see how it is, and effectively just, I guess, spread the Sports Geek word on that platform as well. As always, on iTunes, if you've subscribed, thank you very much. And if you've left a review, again, thank you very much. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes to leave a review. It'd be very much appreciated. Or you can just look up Sports Geek Podcast in iTunes. That's it for me for episode 22. This episode, as I nearly forget to dedicate this episode, because it's been a Collingwood-based episode, I nearly wanted to award this episode to Clyde Drexler of the Portland Trailblazers, but since I had Jonathon Bernard, I'm going to dedicate this episode to Collingwood Premiership captain Tony Shaw, who also wore 22 with distinction. That's it from me. My name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek, and you've been listening to the Sports Geek podcast. Thank you very much.
Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. Find all Sports Geek podcasts at sportsgeekhq.com/SGP. Did you know Sports Geek Podcast has listeners in over 35 countries? Thank you for sharing. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.